All right, I'm going to start the tape here. Gary, if you wouldn't mind speaking into the microphone and letting people know who you are and what your occupation is, please.
So my name is Gary Hodges. I am the indie comic creator behind DVsM, or DVsM, or Dinosaurs vs. Marsbots, however you want to say it. It's a sci-fi horror comic, very character focused. It's an anthology series. I'm just about wrapping up issue 3 of 6. And you can check me out either here on YouTube under my name, Gary Hodges, or on Instagram under Dinosaurs vs. Marsbots, Dinosaurs vs. Marsbots, and that will take you everywhere else. There'll be links to my Etsy shop where you can buy the comic, and Facebook, and everywhere else.
Now, is it safe to say in this book that you are disclosing secret truths that should be better kept from the light?
It's true. It's true. I'm being leaked highly classified documents describing the so-called Dinosaur-Martian War, beginning in the 70s. Visiting aliens became hostile, and in the effort to repel whatever they were up to, the government re-engineered dinosaurs as part of the war effort, as one does. So these are leaked files about this conflict that I take and turn into comics.
So we can probably just use this as a dry run for you in case at any point in time you might disappear from the public, and because something you hit on was actually true.
That's right. This will be my testimony.
Okay.
Wasn't there was a movie, I think, with Mel Gibson. Was it just called something like Conspiracy or Conspiracy Theory?
Conspiracy Theory.
Yeah, and
it's true.
Yeah, and he was like a huge conspiracy nut. And he would just share all these crazy conspiracies all the time. And finally the government goes after him. And because he's shared 8 million different conspiracy theories, he doesn't know which is the one that was true that got their attention.
But the best part of that is that he's actually a Manchurian Candidate.
Is that what? I don't know if I ever actually, if I did see it, I only.
You should. It's actually really good.
Is it?
It's really, really good. And he's stalking a therapist. Whether it's his therapist or not, I don't remember. But he's stalking her as a cab driver who ostensibly lives in his cab. He does, and he has an apartment that's quite the booby-trapped lunatic sphere. But
I've got to watch it now.
Where he produces his literature, but he lives in his cab otherwise, so he has this massive amount of disposable income. And he spends whatever free time he has where he's not got a client in his car outside of wherever this therapist is.
See?
Because
that sounds good. It actually sounds fun.
Well, there's a connection to her by extension from a connection to someone else. It's an incredibly layered, in-depth piece. It's one of those things where when you see it, you really get rewarded through the film. It's like with any specific project, you get rewarded through it. As each step along the way, they give you something more that either takes you a little deeper into it, or it just makes the plot line resonate a little stronger. So
you sold me. I got to check it out. I actually, when I started this, I did try to take a little bit of a dive into that whole world just to. I don't really try to adhere to any kind of established mainline conspiracy theory, but every once in a while I'll throw what I consider an Easter egg in there for the people who are into that stuff, just to let them know that, I did do a little bit of my homework. And but that's one that I didn't get around to. So, but I was always aware of it, and I liked the premise. The premise always sounded fun.
It's a great one, Corbin. Of course, my cat wants to jump on me now. Hey, you're doing something.
That I couldn't tell if that was your cat or my cat. Mine will probably interrupt later too. So
I have a cat, Corbin, that sits in the studio with me all day, every day, and it's only when I'm talking or engaged with anyone else that he needs to immediately jump on me.
I understand. Yeah. I have the same. We might have the same cat. I don't know.
Yeah, I don't have a Roomba though. I've noticed your Roomba antics in the background of your.
I do not have a Roomba either. I do not. I don't know where that even started. Someone brought up.
I don't know. I just hear people mentioning it all the time, and I think it's funny.
I know. Yeah, I don't know.
What's the Roomba? Doesn't have a Roomba. Yeah. So one of the things we talked about yesterday on your feed,
yes,
was the idea of, and this is why I put up on the screen. Are you ready for some ranting?
And
okay, at this point, I got to take these off because.
Absolutely. By the way, I appreciate you making me comfortable with the man in black get up. That's very nice.
Yeah. Well, we've got a review plan for your books, where I'm in the man in black thing, and I've got pop-up screens with number countdowns, and I've borrowed your, American document stamp, and
yes, yeah,
so that I can do a proper review.
I can't wait. I appreciate that.
It's just that I got to get it together to do it. So, okay. So yesterday we were talking about, you had started to weigh in to some extent on the idea of the AI art thing, and I think both you and I have a different take than many, and in a way that sort of says the subjectiveness of a lot of these concerns over artificial art and the idea of how it's going to affect everybody and everything. Mm-hmm. When you started laying into it yesterday, and you started talking about how your perspective is formed on that, and how it's sort of congealed into a statement that you're starting to roundabout, and how you're processing all of this, and that you've given your time to do that instead of immediately stamping up that AI bad logo. Yeah. And we're all gonna die sort of aesthetic that I feel like too many people are taking on. And like me, you had a concern about the hype.
Yes.
The reactionary hype, right?
Yeah.
And I'm not saying this to discredit the people that have made statements. I'm not saying this to diminish the fact that people have their feelings. That's everybody has their feelings, and everybody has their thoughts, and those are all legitimate for them. Mm-hmm. But open generalization on things tends to diminish all of our inputs. When we just have this carte blanche, everybody feels this way about it or that way about it, and that doesn't work to me.
Yeah.
I was, and because it's a nice thing that we discovered yesterday, you and I read a lot of the same things.
I know, that was weird. Yeah.
Yeah. And where I think that there's this aesthetic in society today, there's this this need to compartmentalize everything. I have a real problem with this compartmentalization, this classification thing that we need to do today. Mm-hmm. Good, bad, our side, their side. Where are you politically? What's your party? It's not a case of where do you feel on the ladder of your politic. Like, it's not a case of that. It's what's your party. It's like who you part of, who you with, or where are you? AI good, AI bad.
Yeah.
It's right. Just this sort of energetic sense of you have to define things in a sort of a way that connects to somebody else's thing.
Yeah.
As opposed to having your own. And at least that's been a concern for me about all of this stuff, and just sort of jumping into the mob aesthetic on how we feel about it. And then there's the secondary part of that, which is, of course, you can tell why I like Camille Pellier, because I'm so rambling. Okay, and I can do my Camille Pellier.
Yeah, she's a riot to watch interview, because she goes, and the energy she has is
and she's not young. She's up there.
No,
she's been doing this for a long time.
She's probably I'm assuming she's close. She's got to be close to my dad's age. Like, I don't know. She's been around
I
forever.
don't know your dad. How old is he?
He's early 70s. So
Okay. She's
she's
definitely
got to be in her 60s, right? I mean, at least.
Yeah. Well, she graduated in 78 from college.
Oh, yeah.
She was at college in 78.
Yeah, so
back
she's
when-
got to be well into her 60s. So
Back when the female students had to be in for curfew.
yes, that was
Isn't
one
that
of
funny to
her
think about?
original little her little things she would chase and write about was that
Yeah,
what the message is of that. Like, is that protecting women or is that infantilizing them?
sure, right. So one of the things that I thought from a perspective of Camille Paglia is that she looks at the contemporary movement that we have in art and in our social aesthetic as something that deconstructs things to the point of just being a classifiable term. And it takes things away from the essence of it, or the spirituality of it, is one of the terms that she uses. The aspect of its truth, the creativity, the maker quality, the craft quality, the vocational tradesman aesthetic.
Yeah.
And she talks about this because all four of her grandparents being Italian and all craftspersons, and that we've got away from that with art and turned it into this preciousness, this commodity, this aggrandized association of culture. And yet at the same time, all the major shows and all of the major works that we look at, and I think this applies to the comic world too, are old, or they're corporate, they're big company, they're old masters, they're the old club, they're the old aesthetic. And I think that from that perspective, when we look at things like AI and our concerns about those, I feel like it's in the same ballpark. Like, why are we all worked up about this? And why are we all carrying on about this when it's just indicative of the way that the art world is, and specifically the comic world is. The comic world,
you're like
you don't
more
have Marvel and DC carrying on.
Yeah. So you see it as more of like kind of the symptom rather than maybe the problem.
I think it's I think it's just the next progression of the existing problem at hand.
Yeah.
And that is that we're not looking at the spiritual connection, the preciousness of the creation. We're not looking at the joy of sitting down with the book, whatever size, in our lap, and reading it and ingesting it, taking the time to look at another person's work.
Absolutely.
Even if we do work ourselves, when you take time to look at another person's work, you want to give that its validity, and you want to look at it on its own merit, for one, but at the same time, you are going to scrutinize it from the things that you know and that you are yourself capable of.
Yeah. So yesterday when I was, when I logged on in that morning, I didn't expect to end up talking about AI art. It was something that arose when I was talking about how I had seen The Fabelmans, the Steven Spielberg semi-autobio movie, and how that made me think a lot about passion and craft and the personal nature of work. And I when I started talking about it, I saw a way to compare and contrast that with AI generated imagery. And I was sort of thinking it out in real time. So it's not as like if I had sat and wrote like an essay, I probably would have shaped and polished and arranged. I'm kind of thinking about it out loud and talking about it out loud. But I think where I ended up is what you were just saying. And I was winding it down to that at the end of my stream, which was that if I was going to list or rank my concerns about this technology, I think the first, and it's one that's very, a lot of people are talking about people are going to lose jobs or like they're talking about the commercial aspect, which I have to admit, like, is not super compelling to me. Like, it may or may not be true. And I do have something.
I believe 100% it's true.
Yeah. I mean, if you're a concept artist, I would be sweating. You know, like that stuff like that. It's like, ooh, that doesn't seem good. And I'm aware of all those things. I think about all those things. I have concerns with those things. But in terms of what actually raises my concern, my personal emotional concern about it, it is more what you were just talking about, that, and it's where I finally found my way to in my talk about it yesterday. I think people who are skipping too many steps are denying themselves the spiritual kind of experience of toiling and finding something finally and getting it done and putting it out there. Like if you shortcut that too much, don't worry about stealing jobs. Don't worry about stealing, you know, whatever. You're robbing yourself of the joys and the beauty and the richness of the experience of having gone through that journey. There's a difference between hiking the Appalachian Trail and just taking a helicopter to the end point and like climbing down on a rope ladder. Like it's different. You can't drive the Boston Marathon to the end and say it's the same. You know, like it's like, well, it doesn't really matter. I mean,
somebody's going to stop you.
No, and it's a cliche, but this is the problem with truisms that are also now cliches. We get numb to them and we don't really hear the truth of it anymore.
Sure.
The journey is its own reward. Like that is what you should be in it for. And I think that is, if I had to list, if they're like, give us your number one objection to AI generated imagery, it's like, these people are making stuff and actually not getting the benefit, like the personal benefit. They're putting products out.
That's an interesting take. That's an interesting direction that you're looking at it from that person.
Yeah, and I'm saying it as someone who's now been on this comic journey, if you forgive the expression, for a few years now. The joy and the satisfaction and the headaches and the frustration and the agony and the triumphs and the things you're learning about yourself in the process, the revelations you have. And what I did talk about yesterday, like when you sit and toil and toil and toil and work, and you can appreciate this, you're a workhorse. I'm seeing you all the time, drawing. When you have been doing that as a lifestyle, and then one day a finished thing appears in the mail and you can look at it, there's nothing like that feeling, and they're not getting that feeling. They think that, I'm sure they think they are.
I think they are. I think that
they're not. They can't possibly even imagine it, because there's a difference between coming up with clever prompts and then it being passed back to you, and actually sitting, first of all, studying art, caring about art, getting passionate about an idea, getting at least clumsily good enough to make a go of it on your own, and then working, and then it eventually getting somewhere. Like there's no way around that. And the payoff that you get, the feeling you get at the end, that's the only way to get there. There's only one.
Yeah,
What's that?
I would say that it doesn't compare to just the.
Yeah, it's a different thing. Yeah. And so then the question is, what are you making art for? And this is something I've talked about long before AI art. Are you doing it for an audience? Are you doing it for money? Are you doing it for applause? Are you doing it to be noticed? Or is there something personal that you're doing? This is a personal, individual artist journey. And at the end of the day, when you finish it, you put it out there and people can enjoy it, but you would be maybe just as satisfied throwing it in a drawer and never ever seeing it, because that wasn't what it was about for you.
Sure.
And I think that's the other thing I think they might be oriented towards, I want to put a thing out there with my name on it. Because if they were oriented towards, I want to have that journey as an artist and the audience doesn't matter, well, then there is no journey. And then what would be the point? Like, you're only doing it. Like, is anyone making AI art and putting it in a folder on their desktop and not showing it to anybody?
I bet you there are.
There might be, but like,
that are too reticent to put it in the eye because they're afraid to get in trouble.
Well, maybe they're afraid of getting bagged on. And that's the thing. Like, but I have, and this was the other thing I want to jump off of from what you said.
Sure.
Yes, I have a lukewarm reaction to it, but I'm always careful to kind of qualify. It's like me, and you see it when you watch and the 2 times I've talked about it. Me, I think, like I'm not gonna, because there's people I know that I really like who like it, enjoy it, or having fun with it. And I would never want to say, like, wag my finger at them, and say, shame on you, you're a terrible person that's not it. I'm just saying this is my reaction to it. And
is that any different than punching a person that uses clip art? Right? I mean, so there's a thing about this that's been coming on for some time, and my sense of my take on this is really, we've already got clip art. Okay. Yeah. We've already got these different programs that are utilized in the business world, where you've got to put together your slideshow for your presentation, and there's easy click and associate things. There's all kinds of, hey, if you want to do a video, use our services, and they'll pre-drawn cartoons, and they'll just pop up and it'll look like you're drawing them in real time. And it's like, and people use those left, right, and center. Those things already all exist. Clip art already exists. And all these other different mechanisms are in place for click and paste assembly of websites, and click and paste assembly of photo images into whatever your stuff is, so that you look like you've got an idea. There's so many websites of people talking about whatever it is, history, politics, social interactions of any old kind, or science reports, whatever they are. And they use all these shuttered images. They use all these pre-assembled images that they can just click and dump into their things. And it's interesting when you start seeing them in different ones, right? Like it becomes really, you realize how dismissive that is for the creativity aspect of it. I mean,
I'll do you one better.
That's what it is. It just facilitates their talk, and their talk is really what the point is.
Right. I'll do you one better. Like, at least someone somewhere was commissioned to draw that stuff. But what you also see a lot of is people just doing a Google image search and pulling things, basically doing the thing that people are criticizing the AI image algorithms of doing, where it's just scrubbing the internet, looking for an image that works and pulling it. They're doing the same thing with Google image search and dragging that into their slideshow, or dragging that into their. I'm big video gamer, and every once in a while, I think it was just the other day, there was for a Resident Evil game or something, it was a weird creepy haunted mansion in the game. There's a canvas on the wall, and some player noticed that you can see like a Shutterstock watermark.
Oh no.
So I mean, like it's like a lot of the critique of this is it could be levied at, like, it's a lot of, there's been that mentality. Something that I've been thinking a lot about. I felt, just because I thought she put it well, I have a friend who's a painter, a traditional painter. And when this first bubbled up, I was asking her, like, what's your take on this? And her hot, like, quick reaction was, art isn't just the product. It's the process.
Sure.
And there's no process here. Like with it, that's why. And so it's kind of uninteresting to her. But I think, well, there's a lot of wisdom in that. To me, and I did touch on this yesterday too, I think it illustrates maybe a lack of art appreciation, at least in the West, where our appreciation for art is very product oriented.
Yeah.
Like, it's not, we're less concerned about the creator. We're less concerned about how it was made. We're less concerned about the story they're trying to tell and why. We're more interested in just, like, is the thing pretty or cool or awesome or whatever we're looking for from it, And if you're only oriented toward the product, and so now moving away from the creator who's denying themselves, the person, the AI image creator, who's denying themselves the experience of the journey of making something.
Yeah.
Now for the audience, you're giving them something that doesn't have a story attached to it, that doesn't have a journey, that doesn't have like there's no what. Imagine you're in a gallery, you have these artist statements in the section with the works. Like there's one that's like a binary code 00100111110, and like like I looked for images that had this on the internet and cobbled them together like a collage. Thank you, human. It's like it's just not. But like so the audience again, that's kind of an indictment of the audience that they don't. And that was the comparison I made. And I think it's the one I'm going to start trucking at until someone pokes a hole in it and I realize it's no good. We don't go to the Olympics to watch robots swim. We go to the Olympics to watch people swim because it's fascinating that a person got themselves to that point to be able to do that thing. We don't go to the symphony to watch robots play the violin. We go to the symphony to see some person who taught themselves to do this. It's incredible. Like we don't want to see a robot gymnast. We want to see.
You're relating to provenance.
What's that?
Provenance. It's what's the story with the work?
I think that's the implied
human connection.
Yes, and I think that's the implied thing, and we still get it when it comes to sports. Like people, you don't need it explained to them. I think so. I think you don't need it explained, like why no one wants to watch a robot baseball game. Like, there's something about that human. And even if you watch football, they'll do these breaks where they feature a player and you see this guy talking about like, I grew up with my mom in this town somewhere and she worked hard to get me where I am. Like, like we understand even if it's not conscious, we understand that is part of our fascination. And we're not getting.
And maybe that's why I don't connect to sports.
I don't know. I don't connect with sports either, but I just recognize that no one's hand wringing over, I want to enter a robot in the next Summer Games or like we've had chess playing computers forever, but we're not having chess playing computer tournaments. We're not allowing a chess computer to enter into a tournament with human players. Like we recognize that's different and less interesting. We want to see a human play chess. We don't really care if a robot can do it. But with art, for some reason, there's a little bit of a gap there. With art, for some reason, they treat that a little. I think the public, when I say they, and I'm going to paint with a broad brush here.
Sure.
They see it a little bit like accounting or something where it's like, yeah, if you can get a computer to do it, sure, why not? Like we can get a robot to build a car. Why not have a robot paint a painting? Why not have a robot write a book? And I think it's that gap that people aren't seeing how that's different, how it's different, how your mom's meatloaf is different from a robot's take on meatloaf. Like we get that, but
I'm going to poke a bit of a. I'm going to poke.
Okay,
poke a
please,
bit of a hole.
Please.
Because I'm a bit of a contrarian.
Do it.
A bit. We learned an interesting thing in the last Olympics. There was an interesting thing that I think was disclosed that not everybody really would have wanted it to be disclosed, and it's something that's been rearing its head of late. Michael Phelps, an American swimmer. For the Olympic team. I don't know if he is still. I don't know if he's retired or what he's or if this is all he's made for, or if he's become Aquaman. I don't know. But
I don't know.
He is genetically pre-positioned to be a good swimmer.
Yes.
Okay. So that's one note. One sec. And the other note would be, as soon as the facility of his ability for swimming is recognized, then he is put into that track where in training for these sporting events on this, for the Olympic, whatever that world's called, he meets the criteria to be the good swimmer, but then they put him into this program where it's all about he's having access to facilities and training and skill gaining mechanisms that are just going to capitalize on his physical predetermined position to be a good swimmer.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Mm-hmm. So as soon as you start recognizing that in the sporting world, then it diminishes the idea of he worked so hard to be where he is and all of these things. And I'm not trying to take it away from Phelps, and I'm not trying to diminish any of these physical athletes. What I'm trying to say is there is such a thing that whether or not we're worried about the robots already, the playing field has never been even, ever.
Right. No.
And when you look at, steroids and, and then these arguments about various different things over time, you'll notice that these arguments are kind of great. I hate when these things pop up. Sorry, I'm just clearing something out.
I know, it's funny. I've been noticing them more lately.
They're the worst.
It's weird. How do they even find it? How does that work?
I don't know. They just do. They're there and they hate you and they want to tell you that and upset your apple cart. So when we look at sports from that purview, when you hear about the school biases that really put athletes through for their diplomas and their degrees, or they give them certain benefits so that because the money is in athletics, right, and the sponsorship of the school and so on and so forth.
Right.
And that's disappointing. But this is just how things work. As soon as you make something into any kind of commodity, and as soon as anything gets tainted by, Paul Pateson joined us here. Hi, Paul.
Paul Pate.
As soon as any of these things are put into the capitalist sphere, the capital sphere, you're going to have them maligned from the sort of spiritual earnestness that some people do assess it and approach it from.
Yeah.
So as far as it goes for this, it's hard to make any analogy of how we can process this because I'm not interested in watching a lot of sports. And part of me I love playing sports, but I don't care to watch them, and it's only because of the fact that it's not my bent. It's not the direction I go. I tend to be one who, I'll watch Sabine Hassenfelder do a talk before I'll watch a sports game.
Yeah.
Well,
unfortunately, it sounds like that. It sounds like we're the two least qualified people to talk about loving sports because sure. I don't either. But I feel like I've never developed that appreciate. But I think perhaps for me something that's more true for me would be, for example.
Nice. Dee Dee's with us. Hi, Dee Dee.
Like, I guess what would be a more close to my interests? This is maybe too close to my interests. As I mentioned before, I like video games. I don't want to watch a computer play a video game.
Sure.
Like, why would I be interested in that? Like, I think I do appreciate music. I'm not interested in seeing, a computer play piano. Like there's nothing about that would make me actually want to buy a ticket and sit down and watch it. Like that's just not. And again, because I think that must speak to what you said. It's like, it's this appreciation of the culmination of a journey. Sure. That you're seeing a person who's just like you. And with the Michael Phelps, not like us, not everyone can be Michael Phelps, but a human being, a fellow human being. Like I get the same reaction. I remember it was probably 10 or 15 years ago. I went and saw some kind of a show where it was Shaolin monks doing their kung fu. And they were, flipping around and doing crazy kicks and swinging around swords and everything. And I was just sitting there marveling, like, I can't believe this is what a body can actually do.
Sure.
That a person can actually get themselves to do these, like things that I wouldn't even think were possible for a human being to do. Same if you watch ballet, that's another one. You're watching and it's like, I can't even believe someone got their body to do this. And yeah, maybe they have different, like in terms of the genetic lottery, they hit a lot more wins than I did. But nevertheless, we're all still basically, it's the same parts and the same bones and the same muscles, and they managed to push themselves that far. That's why it's like, do I want to watch a robot do ballet? No. It's sort of interesting. Maybe I'd watch a short video on YouTube about like, we taught this robot to do ballet. It's like, oh, that's cool. But like, that's the extent of my interest. But seeing a person do that, there's this fascination of like, wow, like they pushed it that far. You know, that's amazing. That's
Didi's made an interesting point here. She said that she still likes some of the visual AI art that speaks to her imagination.
Yeah.
And despite the fact that I think because of the way that, she's added to this, she says, when I see some of the fantasy worlds created by AI art, it doesn't matter to me if it's CG, a person, or an AI. And there's something, when I was in school, the first thing that we learned about, now I only went to an enhanced art program at the high school that I was going to. And it was such a good program that in many instances, it eliminated you having to do the first year of university for an art degree.
Yeah.
But it was still run out of an high school. It was it no longer exists in the way it is. Now it's incorporated into the high school system, but it used to be a separate building. Everybody that educated there had to be a professional working artist. It replicated the artist studio format. It was teaching young people, if this is your vocational interest, we're going to teach you to be real artists.
That's cool.
And many of the people that went there are. So, but one of the things that they really wanted to talk to us about was aesthetics. What makes things aesthetically pleasing? And what is it about these works that resonate to us as human beings? And what does the term aesthetics mean? Which was the worst. And because it's that undefinable. But
I know. Well, I mentioned that yesterday too. It's like I used to hate the like, what is art conversation.
Yeah, right.
Boy, here we go.
Yeah. So I look back at that when I look at this debate, as much as when I hear about the simplicity of, well, click paste, I said 6 different phrases and it made this thing.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a part of me that says, cool thing. And there's a part of me that says, knowing the work that it takes for us to produce whatever we produce, there's a little bit of a disappointment in that, Bob over here can 6 phrases and click paste, and he's got this fantastical image where Stu over here has worked for Lord knows how many hours in order to develop a set of skill in order to do that. And yet this person's replicated almost exactly what Stu has put all this sweat equity into learning how to do.
Right.
And that's disappointing for Stu.
Right.
But at the same time, this is where things go. Think about all the effort it went into doing portraits and doing paintings and replicating these beautiful, nuanced people in paintings and drawings. And then somebody walks up and goes, click.
I've got to, yeah.
And so here's that person going, how do I compare that? So this is no different. This is no different than that. This is no different than how word processors and printouts change the typewriting and typesetting and that whole game of, hey, if I want 15 copies of this, I'm putting in extra sheets of paper that can make a second thing as I'm typing this one, and so on and so forth. And as opposed to this guy goes, print 15.
Yeah.
It's what technology is doing. I think that my approach towards all of this has always been about, if I like it and I think it looks neat, and I'm going to be honest, there's a lot of these AI doodly-doos that I think are fantastic.
Yeah, once in a while.
Alien things. They're really cool.
Once in a while I see one that's like, but you know what kind of my reaction is like, sometimes I've seen some that were so cool. It's like, I wish someone had made this. Sure, I want to follow this artist, and there's no artist.
I think that really quickly, though, as I've looked at a number of different ones, because as soon as you see one in your Instagram feed, they're going to feed you 6 different ones.
I know.
And they all look the same. They all have the same quirks.
They do, and now I feel like I can spot them.
Now you can see it, and
it's not just because they have 8 fingers.
This guy are no different than the weird fat, out of shape, middle-aged superheroes by this guy.
Yeah.
Or the weird, girls that work in tourism, but they're tourism robots and they're learning their way through the maze. Like this sort of all these different things. I think what is going to make the difference and what's going to make the mark here is that unique authenticity that I really believe all creators need to have to some extent for what it is that they're doing. I'm missing up on things that people are saying, and I'm sorry, I'll get back to those in just a sec.
Yeah, well, a few of them I did want to, like Dee in particular, I wanted to mention something. But.
Yeah, like it's a challenge because we've trained ourselves to do things. My background's fine art. My background isn't, like, I've grown up reading comics my whole life, but my training's in fine art. Mm-hmm. My training's in doing
so was mine.
And my love is for things like Caravaggio, and it's a different take on seeing. We're seeing all these weird different things, but we're not seeing replications of Caravaggio paintings. At least I haven't as yet. Maybe other people
have.
It
all seems, for whatever reason, the algorithms that they're making so far seem to really favor digital sci-fi fantasy art. It seems like that's what it goes to that well often. And you're not seeing much else. And maybe that's hard. I don't know why. But that seems like what it's doing. And I would say, and I'm not the arbiter of what's ethical or not, please. I'm not even pretending that. But
no, I think it's groupthink. It's groupthink.
To me, an innocuous, or sort of at least a fairly benign use of these image generators is to spark ideas. Like, I feel I don't have much of a reaction to that. Like, that's not one that, now, where on the other end of the spectrum, doing this stuff and selling it, I do have a reaction to that. Like, that to me is strange, especially since it's dubious. It's like this kind of dubious consent of like how this stuff was made and which images they used to make it. Yeah. Like that, it's like, above all else, I respect the rights of artists. So that's why I'm troubled with that. But I do like the idea. I haven't done it myself, but I appreciate and understand. I think Frank Salazar uses it for this a lot. He's looking for an idea for something. He types in the prompts. He gets an image, and he uses that as a jumping point. It's like, oh, maybe something like that. And then he goes and does his own thing. I think that's a fair, that makes sense.
Is that any different than me pulling up all kinds of photos of automobiles for me to understand what a 1965 Lincoln looks like to draw them?
I think it's arguably the same. I think the only potential difference is if you want to be a hardliner about it and say, because this was unethically generated, as in scrubbed the internet, found images that people didn't consent to be used in this way, therefore any participating in it is unethical. Now, I'm not a hardliner like that, but I could imagine that argument, and I could imagine, especially if I was younger and more radical and black and white in my thinking, saying like, absolutely not, I'm not even going to touch it. Like, at this point in my life, though, it's sort of like, I think the genie's out of the bottle, and that's maybe one use that I'm not going to lose sleep over. So
I like a lot of these comments that have been coming through from Dee and Paul. And Paul, I really appreciate you tuning in at a time that's difficult for you to do so. That's fantastic.
Yes.
I'm sorry that I'm always doing things at 2:00 and it doesn't normally fit your schedule. So
it's good to see Paul. By the way, maybe it's just my imagination, but I was wondering ever since I read it, Sam the Private Eye, does he just happen to look a little bit like Paul, or is he actually based on Paul?
You have no idea how exciting it is to me about the content that Paul looks at, and as a creator, and the fact that Paul does kind of look like
he looks a little bit like Sam the Private Eye, who's one of my favorite characters, I think, in the book I read. And then Dee, I was thinking, she was saying that she does portraits, paint, pencils, and paper, which I actually knew that because I think she did one of Jim Lujan's grandfather, which was very sweet. But I bet she especially can appreciate there were all these portrait painters and artists. The camera rolls around. And yes, it can get a more accurate likeness, but does it have the same, like it, I would argue, and I would be curious if Dee Dee would agree, because I've done a lot of life drawing and portrait drawing. It's not necessarily, or even at all, about exactly recreating the person. It's about getting sort of the essence, like, you know, putting like a little bit of the vibe of the person in there, the essence of the person. That might mean pushing it in little ways. And that's something that gets lost when you're like, yeah, but I've got this camera. I'll just take a picture of you. It's not the same as a real skilled artist.
It's not.
Doing a portrait.
I was commissioned to do a painting of a political leader here in Canada who passed away now, but his name was Jack Layton, and he was the head at the time of our third political party, because Canada, we have three principal, our New Democratic Party. And so he came to my studio, and I did a portrait of Jack Layton that hung in our White House, in our House of Commons. Mm-hmm. And it was all about not just capturing Jack, it was about capturing the essence of Jack. And I think that that's something that only comes from the insight and only comes from a person who understands humanity and characteristics of people that can come through.
Yeah.
Right? I don't think that your machine's going to get that.
Yeah.
At least not, and it's just basic programming as we exist at this present time. Maybe, I don't know, 20 years from now?
Who knows? I mean, yeah, I suppose anything is possible given enough time and money. But like Paul's latest thing, like the hypothetical question, can AI ever do a great caricature? My gut reaction, instant reaction, is absolutely not. Like it can't. I can't, because that requires some sort of a human, first of all, a human sense of that other person, you know, and then deciding where to push it. But
yeah, Paul's been doing some great caricatures lately. I mean,
yeah,
and do they look exactly like the person that the caricature is of? I like that, and this is, you know, I don't mean this, I mean this in a really positive way, Paul. I like that they don't look exactly like the cookie cutter. There's 200 kids in a classroom where we're all taught to draw the same bust.
Yeah.
You know, you're all taught to draw the same way of making the marks, and so that you see all this generic style of art come out of this school where all the kids draw the same way and they go on to produce the same things.
Yeah.
And this is the way to do it. And I'm, you know, here's the way to draw such and such. And
well, like the children's, like How to Draw Animals. I just hung out with my nephew over the holidays. He had a book, How to Draw Animals, which we all probably did at that age. He's about 6. And, you know, it's like you're drawing a lion. Start with a circle. Start with a box coming off the circle. That's its snout. Here's its eyes. You know, and like, so now, and that's how you start. That's a good way to start. But ideally, an artist eventually will realize, like, okay, like I can draw a lion in a different position now. It's not all the same lion from the same circle and box.
Dee Dee makes a good point here. And Paul, yeah, definitely jumping on in with that. Yeah, you have to know the person. You got to figure out what's inside of them, right, when you're doing that portrait. And then Dee Dee has something, she doesn't overthink these. She just says, wow, that'd be cool to visit.
Yeah. Yeah.
And Dee Dee, thank you for joining us today. It's pretty awesome. It's
yes.
It's nice that you've come and hung out too. But it's a good spot to be in, Dee Dee, Paul says. There's definitely that. I think that there are a great deal of people that are concerned in the sense that, oh, you know, if this work is similar to mine, I'm in trouble.
Right.
I can understand that, but all of these other people that say, well, now they can just do, you know, these comics, you know, these AI comics. Okay, but it doesn't mean people are going to buy them or read them. As soon as they start doing, I think the problem becomes when people think that they've replaced artists in general. I think that when we see that, well, Marvel doesn't hire anybody to draw its Spider-Man books anymore because it doesn't have to. The AI does it just as good, and it does an absolutely fantastic job of ripping off, insert any famous Marvel artist here.
Well, and Marvel owns all of that. So if they wanted to, they could feed their entire just the complete library of all their works into some algorithm and probably generate all the Spider-Man they would need for the rest of our lives and our kids' lives and our grandkids' lives. The question is, how would the audience respond to that? And
I think the audience would be fine.
Yeah. Maybe I just want to believe this, but I don't think people are interested in that.
In what?
In all Marvel books being drawn by the algorithm from now on. Like people don't want that. They would. I want to believe that. I have to believe that.
So I retired last September, and I've been managing a comic book store for 21 years.
Yes.
And so that's my background, while doing art, showing galleries, and raising a family. But I can promise you, they don't care. If Marvel had a successful algorithmic thing that could replicate the artists that people like and spits out those books and goes on producing those, their drug, right? It's an argument, but their drug of choice, which is they got to have their Spawn, they got to have their Batman, okay? And if whatever draws it, I guarantee you a good percentage of the audience is fine and dandy with it and aren't overly concerned that that's the case. And because I saw something recently that's kind of irritated me a little bit. I'm a big fan of an artist named Stuart Immonen. He's from Toronto. He's a very good artist. He's got fantastic storytelling techniques. Now, from Europe, there's an awful lot of Spanish artists whose style absolutely replicates Stuart. Is it exactly the same? No, because there's always going to be that touch of Stuart's face in all of his characters, as every artist puts in. But they do an incredible job of reproducing what Stuart does, basically. And Marvel has about 6 of them now. And so Stuart isn't working for Marvel now. It's not to say that he can't or that he won't. I don't know. But they've got all these guys that are also Stuarts.
Yeah.
And so he's off doing different things. So since that's happened with that company specifically, and I got to tell you, I like those books. I like those artists too. I don't think people care. So, I think that, no, it's not going to make that big an impact on the mainstream market. I think that I think if anything, that gives free license and absolute support to real people making real books outside of that market. Let the generic machine spit out the schlock and feed the drug need for those that are just, I need everything Spawn, right? That's fine. Let's go. Because that allows more people to see what you're doing, to see what Paul's doing, to look outside the Ken. So Paul says that I'm sorry, let's go back to this. Was this an argument when digital
Absolutely.
art? Did I cut off a point? Were you going to make a point?
No. Go ahead. No, this is fine. And I recall, because we're both old enough to remember the rise of digital.
Sure.
And this was absolutely like this conversation is very familiar to me. Like a lot of the, and I don't mean this specific conversation, but I mean the whole conversation around AI generated imagery. And I didn't have I'm gonna confess, I did have a strong stance about digital back in the day because I was old enough to come out of the traditional world. I cared about graphite and pen and ink and all of that stuff, and that's what I learned. And when digital started coming up, I was very dismissive of it. But I think for different reasons. I will justify my stance at the time as early on, digital art was not very good. So I think it was very fair. It's like, well, this is garbage. I don't want to learn how to do this. It doesn't look as good as stuff
Are you talking about Shatter? Do you remember Shatter? Are you that old?
Which one was? No, I don't know what
Shatter was a full comic book made by somebody with 16-bit graphics.
Oh, I want to look that up. Shatter?
Oh, look up Shatter. It's the first digital comic.
Shatterer or Shattered? Like
Shatter.
Okay. I got to check that out. No, I was unaware of that. This would have been, I remember I took a digital, then it was desktop publishing. That's where you started to learn some of the, the digital stuff. And that was, in the mid 90s.
Yeah, Shatter's early 80s.
Wow.
Yeah, this goes
It's
farther
got
back
to
than
look
that.
terrible.
It's absolutely basic.
Yeah, it's got to be.
Yeah, and yet at the same time, it's what it is. You know.
Wow.
Yeah, Shatter was a thing that, but for its time, I'll be honest, for its time, it it was remarkable, and I looked at it and went, cool.
I'm curious.
But at the same time, because then it was a process to make that. I'm going to pull up some images here, and I'm going to jump the screen for a second, just for people that aren't aware of
I would love
Shatter.
to see it. Yeah.
So this is. Just give me a second, please.
Absolutely.
Too many buttons. Okay, this is Shatter.
Okay.
So all of these digital, and this is the first issue cover.
Are these covers actually done in?
These are covers.
But in the digital.
Yeah, that's a digital cover. So if you get close enough to it, the graphics break down further and further and further. But these are computer generated covers, entire books.
That is. And what year did you say this was?
Oh, this is 85.
That's pretty remarkable for that era.
Sure. Oh, sure, because there was real process behind it. But so I'm saying it's not brand new.
No. Yeah.
Philip, welcome aboard. I'm sorry that for whatever reason it doesn't tell you until after it started. I don't know if that's something I can change or not. I'm sorry.
I feel.
Yeah, Dee Dee says something lovely here. She doesn't care what AI does. She still buys Gary's books.
I appreciate that, Dee Dee.
And then, of course, Paul has said there's a guy I know who's real sketchy and is low-key passing off AIs.
I see a lot of that. And I see a lot of people being very... They're not saying they drew it, but they're also not saying they drew it. You know what I mean? Like I've seen a lot of that. I've seen some people just be trying to pass it off, which is just sort of, I don't know, to me, that indicates some sort of insecurity. Like, I think if you're doing it, you should just be open, you know? And if you're worried, like, people will want it if it's digital, well, that's their choice, you know? Like, I mean, I don't want to manipulate someone into a sale. You know, personally, I don't know about these people.
So I have a fun story.
Okay.
So, we had Neil as a guest at the London Comic Con.
Yes.
Neil Adams. Okay. And so there was an artist when Neil was our guest. There was this guy that got signed up, who is a guy who's done cover art for all these different companies and done coloring, and. And so when he's done all this color, and that's the basis that we had him come into the show. And I'm not going to say his name because it's pointless, right? Okay. Welcome aboard, Seven. So the thing was this, though, because of the show organizer, and I'm just the humble art director that tries to oversee the artist guest and the artist alley. So because the show organizer laid out the tables and laid out things, he just happened to have his 2 tables that he required be directly in front of Neil Adams.
Oh.
Whoops. Because Neil walked over to this guy and said, who are you fooling? And purposely called out on the individual. Who are you fooling? That's not your work. Wow. None of this is your work, because you're claiming that this is your original art. And that is a redrawing of one of mine. That is redrawing of Alex Ross. And that, is actually I painted it. Okay, I'm sorry. That's a repainting of Alex Ross.
Wow.
There's a guy who there's a guy who didn't pull punches. And he said, I think that anybody at this show is going to realize that, whatever you're making yourself out to be, you're not. So I think the person that's really being fooled here is you. And
I love that. I love it. Ding, 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 ding.
So he's never been back to the show.
I would hope not. I mean,
well, no, not because we refused his application.
No, because presumably because that was a little bit of a wake up call.
He's done.
Yeah.
And so, okay, I'm a colorist. Stick to that.
Yeah.
Right. And but I don't know how that's affected him in the marketplace or not. But Neil was very pointed with this guy about it.
Yeah.
And now Neil was a cagey guy. Okay, just a cagey guy. He had 11 tables to spread all his stuff out. Yada yada yada. Neil's, every now and then Neil would turn to me and go, "It's good to be Neil Adams."
Wow.
He's a character. But
okay.
Okay, he was a character, but he's a great guy. It was a really nice opportunity to talk to him, and I learned some things from himself. He and his wife were of a different time and said things that were not the most politically correct, but they're wonderful.
Sure.
They're still wonderful people and had deliberate earnestness in an industry. And I noticed that a couple of times that Neil looked at people's work that they brought to them, or that they brought to himself and through Maryland, and said, "Okay, let me help you out with what you're trying to do here." Yeah. And I can tell you other established names in the industry that did the opposite. Yeah. Because for some reason, they thought that this kid who had been drawing for the last 2 weeks was somehow competition for their 30-year career.
Right.
I'll never understand it. But so I think that some of these biases, sure. I think that some of this bias towards, it's going to disrupt my apple cart, is an expression that I know I'm probably overusing, but has to do, like you say, with some degree of insecurity.
Yeah.
And it has to do with just an actual lack of just understand who you are and appreciate that. You're not in any jeopardy here. You're not being threatened. This is what it's going to be, and people are going to see it for what it is. Some of these things are fun to look at, but I'm not going to hire that guy because it's not taking us long to start to look at type.
Yeah. No,
how many different of these graphic designers that all draw the same landscapes do people really want to chase individuals of?
Right. I think, well, and maybe it's I'm lucky, I guess, or fortunate that I'm not threatened by it only because, if only because, I think there's a few reasons, but most primarily because I don't see it as being in direct competition with either my comic work or my day job.
Sure.
Like I don't see myself as replaceable with it in its current form. And I can't envision it being, something that will ever get to a point that is really competing against me. If I was some sort of sci-fi fantasy concept artist who did matte paintings, maybe then I would have a different concern about AI imagery, but I don't. That's why my concerns are more, for lack of a better term, kind of touchy-feely, woo, spiritual, like you're denying yourself the artist journey by shortcutting in this way. Like I'm not, so like it's going to take jobs. Like, these clients are going to flock to this. I freelanced for a long time as a graphic designer and an illustrator. I still once in a while will pick up a job, but I generally don't anymore. But for a long time, that was all I did. And my attitude is, it's a little bit like, I can't believe all these weird gaming analogies I keep going back to, but I remember when piracy, or with movies, piracy is a thing. And usually the counterpoint of dubious validity, but it's something to think about, is none of these people who are stealing stuff were actually customers anyway. Like they were never, like someone who's pirating a game wasn't going to go and pay $60 for it, at the store. Like that's so you didn't really lose a sale. I feel like that's also sort of true with people like, AI is going to take jobs. I don't know if these were paying clients.
Those people were going to hire you anyways.
Exactly.
I think clip art today are not hiring you to do anything anyways.
That's right. The bigger threat to professional artists is stuff that's been around forever, like Fiverr. Like Fiverr is, like that's that thing where like, a Fiverr is a thing where you say like, I need a logo for whatever, or I need something for a t-shirt. and it's this race to the bottom of bids, and you're competing
wow.
against people from all over the world. And so Fiverr's like, for $5 you could get yourself a logo or something. That's a much bigger existential threat to working artists. Another one is, and you see this all the time in comics, people hiring artists overseas. Like people, you know, in where there's a cost of living situation that's nothing like, you know, maybe the United States or Canada or Europe. You know, you're hiring people in Mexico or the Philippines or, you know, wherever. You're going someplace where people can work for a fraction of what you'd have to pay a Canadian or an American or an Englishman or something like that. And it's still a ton of money for them.
Yeah, but I would thought that those people would have done that anyways anyhow.
Well, and see, that's the thing. So that's why I'm reluctant, and I don't wade into the AI thing really at all. This and yesterday is probably the most I've ever talked about it publicly. Sure, but I'm not comfortable with the whole how this is going to affect people professionally and commercially conversation, because I'm somewhere between I don't know and I'm not convinced.
Sure.
I tend to feel like I tend to focus on, and if you hear me talk about it, it tends to be what my friend said. Art isn't just the product, it's the process, and there's no process here. There's, i.e., if you want to be mean about it, this is sort of soulless. And then also for the artist, they're not stealing a job, they're stealing from themselves. They're denying themselves the experience of, there's no passion there. There's no evidence of passion there. There's no suffering for your work, which is a cliche, but there's none of that. There's no learning or mastery. There's no like toiling. And as a result, there's none of the journey and the learning about yourself and the growth and the payoff of finally reaching the finish line. You're not having any of that experience. It's sort of an empty.
Those people never would have.
They never would have.
This world that we as creators completely miss the truth of, and that is that we look at the world through very different lenses than most other people.
Yeah,
and they don't care.
They don't get it.
In that. They're interested in the world as it's provided for them, and it makes the easiest accommodation to them, and that's fine. There are always going to be those people.
Yes.
But the artist being worried about it and being overly concerned about, well, what does that mean for me? It never meant anything for you. It never did. It never will. Yeah. Those people were never in your camp, and it's just a simple truth. My concern would be the more and more accommodation of these things. The only concern I have about this sort of stuff at all, the more and more accommodation we have of these things, the easier we make it across the board all the time with these things, the less that more and more people look towards the authentic experience of working with an artist.
Yes, that's where we sort of can go full circle back to Andrew Keene and his. And I know this is
sorry, Paul.
Sorry, Paul. And I know this is inflammatory language. He's a provocative guy, but we go back to the ocean of garbage. We go back to the idea of like, if there is just 80 million times the amount of media you could possibly look at in a lifetime out there, how are you finding the real thing? How are you finding the genuine article? How are you finding the thing that is like actually got a little bit of heart in it? And it gets harder and harder and harder when there's all this other stuff you have to sift through and see past and dig around. Now that I have no answer for. I don't know. I mean, we all, I think all of us in the chat, you and I, everyone we know, this is the story of our lives. I mean, if you're an indie, it's like, how you get noticed? That's the challenge. That's the truth.
Do you want to hear something fun?
Sure.
And then I want to get to something that Dee's brought up.
Yeah.
The book that I'm posting right now on Instagram is my 31st book.
Wow.
Yep. And the comic company I started in 2015, we've published 70 books, the 31 included. We've published over 250 people locally. I've only done the company regionally, which means I never bothered with distribution.
Yeah.
I wouldn't run to all the comic book stores in all the cities around mine to make sure there's copies and then go back and check if my consignment sold. I don't care. I just sold them out of London.
Yeah.
And not even all the stores in London, because a couple of them stink. So, yeah. And yet, despite that, I've published that many books without going bankrupt.
There you go.
And to cover the cost of everything. And I've only got 6 long boxes in my house of copies of all these things that I sell for, the farther and farther away it gets from its publication, the less and less money I sell it for as I go to shows. And so, but the basics for me is that I've done all of this work and nobody knows it, and because for me, it's not that. For me, it's the act of creativity. I'm going to do it anyways. It's the compulsion that Palea talks about. Artists and creatives and craft persons and tradespersons and all of these individuals that have a sort of calling towards something, we're going to do it anyways.
Yes.
It doesn't matter about robots. It doesn't matter about space aliens from beyond.
No.
It doesn't matter if a Sasquatch is going to come out of the woods and smack the pencil out of her hand and draw it themselves.
Right.
It doesn't matter. It's, and so because of that, when I hear about all these people's concerns, I go, what is it? Is it, if it's an accommodation of living, and because I'm, I've raised a family and I've been doing it. I've been showing my work professionally in galleries and creating books. We're creating books in only the last so many years, but I've been showing my work in galleries professionally for 30 years. And despite that, it's never been about thinking that I'm going to live a full-time art career. And because there's a selfishness to that a lot of us forget about. You might be able to have Mr. and Mrs. Professional big name art career recognized in galleries and literature throughout the world and in media throughout the world. But there's a cost for that. And I never wanted to pay it. Yeah. Of losing family, of having everything be about me. Right?
Yes.
And the realization of that means we're compulsed to do it, but we're not doing it from an egocentric center. That's not what it's about for us weird compulsed lunatics that are makers.
Yeah.
We're makers. We just this is how we communicate. This is one of the means that we have for talking to people. We're the one who stands around the fireside 15,000 years ago and tells some great tales about the bison we saw yesterday.
Right.
Nobody's paying
or why we think the mountain is that shape, or how we think, absolutely.
Moonford came down from the sky and clapped his cheeks together and made people.
It's something I've talked about on my channel. First of all, I agree 100% with everything you just said, 100%. And it goes back to, I've talked about it on my channel, and this is not the case anymore because my routine has changed. But when I wrote the first DVsM book, 1975, I was at a point in my life where I was frustrated with myself that I had all these ideas for long-term, ambitious, creative projects, and I had never followed through with any of them. I would do small things. I would do little prints or little, whatever, little things here and there. But I had an idea for a novel that I had about a third written and I had set aside. I had some screenplay ideas that I had kind of outlined and never done. And I had the ideas for the comics. And I finally just got fed up with myself. I want to, at least once in my life, follow through with one of these things. And I sat down and I did the first comic. And I did consider very seriously, this wasn't just there was a few days where I thought that was most likely what was going to happen with DVsM. Once it was done and I got the proof, I almost just said, well, I'm glad I did that, and put it in a drawer. And then, because it was just about that. I just wanted to say that I followed through. I just wanted to say that I did the thing. I just wanted to have that experience of coming up with the idea, writing it, drawing the comic, getting it printed, and being done. And to me, the whole second part of that, which is I think what most people are chasing, I shouldn't say most, a lot of people are chasing, putting it out there, selling it, getting people to read it, having an audience, all that. That was so much less important to me than the actual making, being the maker, like you're describing.
I think that's healthy. I think that's healthy.
And I'm a big believer in it. And I'm very reluctant to ever say, like, this is where your head should be. But, like, I couldn't do it any other way, personally. Like, I think that's your head being in the right place. If it's like, I would do this on a desert island. If I was on a desert island, I wouldn't be able to do the comic. I wouldn't be able to plug stuff in. But I would be carving things out of the coconuts.
Yeah, but you'd still be doing comics. You'd still be doing comics on coconuts.
Maybe it'd be comics on coconuts, but yeah. But the point
something
is,
on
like,
coconuts.
you should be doing it because you like doing it.
Yeah.
And an analogy I've used with the Artcasters a lot is, in terms of what kind of creative I am, I compare myself to the guy that has a model railroad set in his basement, you know, who's trying to find the perfect little lamppost and trying to find the perfect little park bench and building all the little trees. And once in a while, he'll say, like, hey, come on down and look at the railroad, you know, and you look at it, but it's not for them. It's not to sell tickets. This is my little journey. This is my little thing.
My railroad.
You know? Yeah, my railroad. This is, I'm having, this is, yeah.
And like that, I own the controls.
It's similar to how I approach the comics, where it's like, I'm going to make this thing and enjoy making this thing, and then I'll put it out. And if people buy it, that's awesome. I'm very grateful. And if people love it, that's great too. But that is not why I'm doing it. You know,
started a comic company because my wife found 3 finished books in a drawer.
See?
I had 3 books completely done and in a drawer that I was doing while I was doing portrait work and while I was doing, you know, gallery showing work and things like that. And I would have these little mental moments where, and I just draw in ballpoint pen or whatever it is I'm working on the side. And I put together my first 3 books that way. And Lori found them when we moved my studio home and said, you got to put these out. You got to do something with this. Yeah. That's why we started our publishing company.
See, I feel like it's funny. We read the same things and we have sort of the same mentality.
Are you my dad?
Yeah, I know. Have you done 23andMe? Like, we need to figure out what the deal is here. But I think so. You can imagine.
I think, Gary, I'd be your dad in this context over you being mine. My oldest is 31.
If I describe now that I've described sort of my approach to my work, a person shouldn't be shocked if they say, like, what would Gary think about these AI things? Like, you can imagine, there's nothing, all the part that I'm in it for, that doesn't exist. And again, the idea of like, well, I'm going to type in prompts but never show people how cool the output was. Like, that doesn't seem to be a thing either. People are doing it to share it. Mm-hmm. I'm not doing things to share them. I'm doing them because this is my, to use your words, I'm a maker. Mm-hmm. This is my journey. I find the journey valuable. I love the process. And you can imagine where it's not like dismissive, like, oh, these people, there's no anger or hate in there. It's just like, you guys, you're not actually at the party. Like, the party is fun. I would like you to come to the party. You know, like, I would like you to be with all of us. You know, that's my kind of attitude. It's like, you're missing out. You're missing out on the best part of this.
The comic jam that I run here in London, it's going on tonight at 6:00. Everybody get on a bus and come. Anyway, so how the bus ride. It's all about a couple of us that are older guys. And sitting down, and it's an all ages event. You know, there's a cash bar at this gallery, so mom and dad want to have a cup of wine while their kids are there. That's fine, whatever. Clearly, I don't drink wine if I'm saying put it in a cup. But it's just about helping these young people find their voice. And when I say young people, I mean, we've got kids that are 11 years old, and we've got kids that are 20 some odd. You know, and we got kids that are in their 40s. Like, it's an all age thing, right? And we started this at the same time as we started the comic company, and we've been doing it for all these years. We had to take time out for COVID, but it's not about guys like myself or Doug Rogers sitting down and going, "Well, I've done all these books."
Yeah.
No, it's about, here's some pencils, here's some paper, let's go.
Yeah.
You know, somebody draws the first panel, slides it in the middle of the table. The next person that grabs it does the next panel, tries to continue that narrative. I don't care who it is, right?
That's fun.
Because the little kid that adds this stick figure drawing to the robot fight.
Yeah.
You know, the first person has this pithy, esoteric commentary talking about the psychology of being, and the next kid says, "You smell like farts." That's a good comic.
That's a compelling read. That has twists and turns you're not going to expect. But
Didi brought up an interesting point. When you enter a game world, do artists feel threatened by that art?
I don't know, because I would say, at least for me personally, much the opposite. I find video games and the artistry in video games very inspiring.
Oh, sure.
Like,
some of it's gorgeous.
Some of it's gorgeous, and even not like, what I especially love, if I had to pick a kind of video game art, I kind of love the early, like the 80s, 90s pixel art era, especially the 80s though, because to me it's like digital mosaic. The idea of having to try and find a way to make something understandable visually, with little squares and a limited color palette. Yeah. To me, I love the challenge of that. And I have a lot of admiration for the artists of these, like the old Nintendo games, the old Sega Master System games, whatever, who with a very limited toolbox had to make things that looked compelling and fun and attractive and engaging. Like that, I like the idea of art with limitations. And it's probably part of why I adopted a black and white style for DVsM, where there's not even a lot of grayscale, hardly ever. It's because I like the challenge of, like, how do you make that look right if you're just dealing with black and white?
And and that's where you want to look at artists like Alex Toth and Kriegstein and those guys who mastered that sort of approach of simplistic line, right? I don't play video games. I am a cautionary tale. I am the guy that if my kids or my grandkids let me play a game with them, if they're running across the screen and I'm the person getting dragged and falling in the hole in the floor because I can't keep up, I'm just the worst player. Right. And yet, because, my wife and I love books. So we have a library in our house that's attached to my studio. And so that's why I'm always running all the time in videos and grabbing books. Yes, Deed, I totally played Myst and Riven because that's my kind of video game.
Yeah, Myst is a classic. Well, talk about an inspiring.
Those aren't video games. Those are puzzles with absolutely gorgeous scenery.
But also that sort of inspiring, surreal landscape, like that is kind of has like a dream logic to it. It's really cool.
There's an interesting thing. Didi says that AI worlds remind her of that. There's a truth in that. So I have shelves in my library that are art of video game books.
Mm-hmm.
I don't play video games, and yet I love the construction, the making of the actuality.
Yeah.
And so I celebrate that. But the diversity of them, things like Battlefield or Cyberpunk or Dishonored or Eve or Cuphead.
Cuphead. Cuphead is some of the best. I don't know if this is like a controversial statement for any of the animators out there. Cuphead is maybe my favorite hand-drawn 2D animation I've ever seen in my life. Like, it is unbelievably beautiful and skillful and impressive. Well, and I have, again, on the admiration of video game art, especially now when these are 3D worlds that the player could go potentially anywhere.
Yeah.
It's almost like designing a movie set, but more because it needs to work from any angle. Like, when a movie set, you know where the camera's going to be. Like, you don't have to build the back of the saloon. Like, we're not going to see it. But in a video game world, something like Red Dead Redemption 2, like, the player might, go into the building, go around the building. They might go into any room. They might look into any closet. Like, and you need to have that all realized. The amount of visual work that has to take place is staggering.
Yeah, there's so much stuff. I got to take my cat just completely covered me in hair.
On black suit, no less.
Yeah, good job, Kat. There's something to be said for the authenticity of how people approach whatever it is that their creative voice is, and they try to structure that together in order to produce it as an environment or a world. Like, there's all this jibber jabber all the time now about you need to consider world building. If something is deliberate, you don't consider it. It just is.
Right.
You're not thinking about, oh, I might need to populate some other idea. No, you just can't stop filling the cup full of whatever the hell you've come across. And
Right.
I think that you can always tell when there are external players that come in that don't understand the structure of the thing in front of them. They don't understand the different aspects of what's coming out of here or coming out of here onto whatever surface or whatever device it is, right?
Mm-hmm.
And okay, here, Kitty, there you go. Dee, this is Corbin. He appears in everything because he's annoying. This is my studio cat who sits. He has his own seat beside mine in my studio. It's absurd.
It's adorable.
And then 7, you're right on the dime. He's a diva.
He's a diva. Mine is still out, probably sitting in the window, but that's his little cat bed back here.
There you go.
Yeah.
No, he has a raised pedestal beside me. He has to have a raised seat. It's obnoxious. And I concede to it because my kids are grown up, and this is my new child, and I spoil it.
Yeah.
So there's something to be said for a lack of understanding for people about the processes involved that are conscious and subconscious. And this is what you're never going to get in AI. And this is why I think it delegitimizes the whole idea that AI is going to replace everybody and everything. Right? Oh, I dressed up in formal dress today, Philip, because of DVsM. I started as an FBI agent with the sunglasses and the whole deal. Or a man in black. Because Gary's here.
Yeah.
So I think that AI is never going to input all of those characteristic things that dump out of our brains and out of our hands and out of our free associations from all of the other ephemera that we've seen, because AI is just looking at a grand pool, right? Just a grand pool of whatnot, and it just homogenizes everything. It's just
sort of things. Yeah. So the question is,
look like the stewardesses look like the superheroes.
So the question, and this is probably what Corey Kerr would. Well, I think I know what his answer would be. Well, I don't know. He wouldn't definitively say an answer, but I think he would say this is his fear. Does that mean that what we do will be relegated to the portrait artists of ye old, 18 before the camera came along? Like, is art, what we do, going to become this kind of niche-y, unusual? Like, it's already a little niche-y, but is it going to be even more like a strange boutique-y thing?
100%.
Yeah, are you saying yes?
I've agreed 3 times. Yeah.
Okay.
I am so absolutely certain of that. And yet it doesn't. Thank you very much, Seven. It does not diminish the fact that the authentic creativity by individuals.
Yeah.
And so, as much as I agree with that over time, you're going to see X amount of creativity relegated to footnote, and X amount of creativity relegated to, token historicity, right? Oh, Van Gogh. It's Van Gogh. Whatever. In the meantime, Dee makes a fantastic thing right here. In the meantime, so whatever. We're still doing what we're doing because it's who we are. And that's
what would be a nice result in all this? And if there is this sort of AI wasteland that Corey Kerr worries about, it would be nice if, ironically, it created, and this is what I hope for, a deeper appreciation and a deeper valuation of actually human-made work. Like that we'll finally get back to people recognizing that there's value in that. And the people, yes, there won't be as many of us, but the ones that have hung in there and are good enough, like, they'll be successful.
I think that whether there's success in it or not, I think that the ones that really crave the notoriety and the success and the full accommodation of income because of their thing they're doing on whatever social platforms, and that's their entire generator of money, they're always going to have to hustle anyways.
Yeah.
Always. Yeah. But at the same time, it's like Dee says, portraits are still going to be doing portraits. People that are doing straight on illustration work, like in the context of your day job, Gary, You know, this is always going to continue on. These little
Right.
things are always going to continue to happen because there's a sort of a uniqueness that somebody's always going to find a hold of. The general populace is always going to go the way the general populace is going to go the way. And it's usually that of the easiest accommodation that they can have with the least amount of learning curve. Just how
Right.
it is, right?
Olive Garden's always going to get more customers than your corner Italian place.
You got it. You
Right.
got it.
Right.
I was excited at the end of COVID to see the restaurants that lasted that were unique. I couldn't care less if McDonald's shut down. You know,
Right. Right.
And that's the a truism I think that we have as human beings is that there's always going to be outsider art, people painting, you know, portraits of their friends that they've always had on the bottom of the muffin tins. You know, little portrait for each muffin spot. There's legitimacy to that.
Yeah.
Is it quirky and different? You bet it is, but it's theirs, and somebody's going to want to buy that. You know, somebody's always going to be engaged and want to read Kurt Vonnegut in so many years from now.
There you go.
You know, somebody's always going to be engaged in, I don't know, reading Martin Friedman. Like it's there's this sort of broad tangibility that we're always going to have. That we're always going to have that connectivity to that. What is 7 saying here? Dee, one day the original art that you created will be in museums like all human artists to be celebrated. I'm going to disagree with you, 7. This is a little controversial. I mean, I'm sure it is, but that's okay because I'm a big baboon. I don't think that art needs to be in museums to be celebrated. I think that if the motivation is because a person needs recognition externally, power to them. But I don't think all art needs to be there, and I don't think all important art is there. What's the Picasso painting? La Belle? No, it's the Two Ladies. It's the abstraction piece.
Oh, I don't remember the name of it.
For the first time.
I know what you're picturing. Yeah, I can picture it, but I don't remember the name.
Arguably the most important piece of art in the 20th century.
Yeah.
But I can't even remember the name.
No. Terrible.
Right? I should be ashamed of myself, should I?
We're going to have to turn in our artist cards, I think.
Yeah, that's it. Get back to the union. Is there a union?
That's right.
I owe money. That doesn't make the work legitimate to the general populace because the general populace looks at it and goes, oh, my 7-year-old could replace that.
Right.
But at the same time, what that did to flip the switch and say that because of the democratization of materials, and we have acrylic paints and things like that now, more and more people can afford to do art. Therefore, more and more people can explore and paint outside of the avenue. Right? So that now you can have people pushing abstraction, you know, and exploring different avenues of how to apply paint to surface and how to replicate an intimation of nature as opposed to an actualization of trying to capture it like a photographic image. And then we had cameras, and you don't need to do that now. So now that I can try to explore the color and bring the painting out through the color, be Monet, and those guys. So I don't think that everything needs to be in museums for it to have legitimacy. In fact, of course, if anything, museums, just like movie theaters, are becoming less and less relevant.
I would agree. I mean, I think I've had way more. I know this is a big word for it, but transcendent experiences with art in itty bitty little galleries. You know, like or weird little like off the beaten path places where some artists set up, than in a full blown art museum. But.
Now, warranted. There's some things that the impact of in person has importance. Like, most people don't realize how small the Mona Lisa is. If 7, you brought up only one Mona Lisa painted by a human. Sure, but there's a bazillion reproductions of it. And that diminishes the impact of it. And then when people realize when they see the Mona Lisa that it's only, that big. Okay. But then when you go to a gallery and you see Attila Richard Lukács, or however you pronounce it, is an artist that was from Vancouver, Canada. And he would do these 12-foot by 30-foot paintings of skinheads. skinheads getting ready to go for a march, undressing, naked, with their butts facing the viewers.
Yeah.
Attila Richard Lukács was gay. And Attila Richard Lukács would do this beautiful exploration because he loved the masculine visual of he found a sexuality in the appearance of skinheads. And so these skinhead paintings are somewhat homoerotic. But they're
probably not what they thought.
Just look them up.
Yeah.
Right? 12 feet, 30 feet. Right? Painted at times. He used tar with his paint. He puts tar in these things. Anyways, but the impact of seeing that life-size guys in these industrial settings, their butts facing it in some cases, naked skinheads.
Dee has the comment right there at the end. No, both below that.
Valley that reached the ceiling and looked up at a world. That's exactly it. You're immersed.
No, her next one, her about the 30 by 12 foot. There we go.
Yeah, but at the same time, you just said about the Dali that reached the ceiling.
Right.
But no matter what it is, I think more and more today, people are going to see far more and more people temporarily engaged in things that they can click through, and it's lunchtime. Yeah, I like that art. Oh my God, that was awesome. Check out that one. Yeah, totally love art.
I don't get this. I don't get this. Yeah.
I got this one. That one's weird. Yeah. Oh my God. Hit it down.
Right.
But those things are getting more views.
They are. Well, and that almost goes to I think the larger question where is this really about AI imagery, or is this about art appreciation in our culture?
It's aesthetics. It's just basic aesthetics.
Right, exactly. And I think maybe sometimes what we're talking around is the difference between, I think especially when I see artists talk about this, you can tell there's a lot of agitation, a lot of frustration, a lot of, and it comes out in sort of disorganized ways. I think sometimes I would propose what's happening there is what they're reacting to isn't so much the technology. They're reacting to the fact that they're troubled or upset or disapproving or disinterested in it. And yet non-artists seem to think it's cool. And that's what they're reacting to. It's no, you don't understand. There's why aren't you not seeing this the way I am? And it's because they have a totally different, they're someone who enjoys art. They're not someone who makes it. It's hard for them to see it the way you see it.
We both make art. We have we read a lot of the same materials. We have a lot of the same associations, and yet I promise you, we're grossly different.
Yeah,
sure. And not just in the the stereotypical, but there's
you're twice as tall as me. You're what?
Yeah, well, I'm twice as tall.
You're exactly double. I am 3'3", but no.
Yeah, I'm only 5'18".
There you go.
I desperately hope someone's doing that math right now.
Yeah.
Let this 5'18". Yeah. So it's a challenging thing in and of itself, the act of making, but we do it because we do it. I mean, even as we're talking, I've been painting and doodling, and because I'm
good for you.
Well, this is let me switch a camera. This is is this going to come up? Oh yeah, hold on. Too many buttons. So this is the little mixed thing that I've been painting and drawing while we're talking.
Wonderful.
And it doesn't speak to anything other than, even while I'm jabbering with you, we're doing what we do. And it's like Dee says here, it doesn't, who cares if others like it or
Yeah.
She makes and enjoys game art, comic art, AI art, surrealism, it's, and then of course you don't care if anybody likes any of the above because you're a maker.
Yes.
You make it. The people that come into any industry or any field with the objective of engaging in that industry or that field, even if it's a craft, even if it's selling cars. If your objective is to make money, you are either going to have fantastic success or fantastic failure.
Yeah.
It's if you're going into any pursuit and you're doing it from a compulsion, you're doing it from a sense of internal necessity. It'd be great if I made a lot of money doing this. It'd be great if I could afford to do this full time because this accommodated me doing it.
Yeah.
But I got to do it anyways.
Right. And I emphasize whenever I get the opportunity, so I'm going to do it again. I think there's a lot of peril in having goals that are, when you really analyze them, outside of your control. I think that's a dangerous thing for your own just mental health and your spiritual health and your enjoyment of the parts that you do have control over. And I think it's important, especially as a creative, to be able to sort those out. What is the part you do have control over? I mean, just in life, it's a good lesson, but especially if you're a creative. What are the parts you have control over? What are the parts you do not have control over? You can tilt the scale in your favor. You can try to get all your ducks in a row to encourage or allow for opportunities when they come by to take them. But really, ultimately, you can't actually make the thing happen. And like an analogy I really liked was from the great Rick Rubin, music producer. He was talking about songwriting, but I think it applies to so many things. He was saying that the key to, what's the trick to writing songs, writing a great song, and ultimately this admission that like I can't make myself write a great song. Just like I can't make myself catch a fish. All I can do is go out on the boat every day with my lure in the water and wait. Like I need to be open. Like the only way to catch a fish is to actually make yourself open for that thing to happen. I'm out, I'm in my boat, I'm in the water, I've got my bait, I've got the lure in. Like that's all I can do. But ultimately I have no control over whether the fish bites. Yeah. To me, that's a little bit about being concerned about, I want to live off my comic money. Okay, I don't really I can do things to make that better. I can, all the equivalents of I'm in the boat, I've got my gear, I'm ready. But I can't make it happen. I can't make people buy this. I can do everything else. But ultimately, what do I have control over? I have control over, again, going back to the fundamentals, my process, my intention, why I'm doing it. Do I enjoy doing it? What am I trying to do? How am I doing it? Like what I'm doing. I can control that.
I always have a concern about when people. Okay, so you see on YouTube a lot, or on other different social platforms a lot, and I have a problem with engaging. Like I'll check in on things, but I really have a problem with figuring out and to be conscious enough to, like, I'll try to click like on people that I know and things like that, or things that I appreciate. But I tend to, like you said, I'm a workaholic, right? Like I'm always doing something. So I tend not to be thinking externally like that. But I find that when people say, here are the 7 steps you need to do to be a success.
Yeah.
Oh boy. If those aren't just foundational generalizations of, you need to do the work, you need to understand the basics of what it is that you're trying to do. If it isn't those basic foundational things, right? I think that isn't helping anybody.
No.
And so I tend to look at those as it's a cui bono. Who benefits from this? Well, the person that's putting out the article and saying, these are the 7 tips, click. But it's not actually the 7 tips, because the way I grew up and the way that I create my books and create my stories and the way that how I express myself in my work is substantially different than the next person.
Yeah.
Because it has my absurd way of looking at the world. Now I can be rational and think of things without being such a sarcastic person, and that's what I'm doing in this current project that I'm on. But generally, my stuff is pretty ridiculous, and that's, whatever voice that I'm using, it's not just one type of voice. And I think that the more homogenized things are, whether it's this is the way to do it or this is AI is AI is not going to replace everybody because of the authenticity of the individual voice as opposed to the generalization.
Right.
And I think,
and I wanted a quick interjection. There's probably we can distinguish AI replacing what artists do and AI taking jobs. There is an important distinction there. Like, AI is not going to keep you from doing your thing.
No.
AI is not going to keep you from painting your painting or writing your book or writing your poem or writing your song or learning the guitar or writing a comic, whatever the thing is. AI is not going to interfere with that.
No.
Maybe some people, yes, it'll compete for a job, but that's a different thing.
Yeah, that's true. Thanks for hanging out, Philip.
Philip, it's good to see you.
Dee Dee says, your personality and interaction make what you sell more interesting too. She means you, Gary.
That's very nice, Dee Dee. Thank you.
Stories in person you tell me make me want to read the stories you write and draw. Oh, that's good.
Very kind. That's very kind. Thank you. I appreciate that.
Because there's that. Okay, so here's the thing. When I looked at your first book, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because of, one, being a maker as well, but also because of being so immersed in the comic world.
Mm-hmm.
I call good books sequential literature.
It makes me think the old DC Comics thing of picto-fiction.
Yeah. Well, that's fine. That you want some pretension? There you go. Buckle
there
up.
You go. Yeah.
But there's certain things that aren't just, like, a lot of people say, I'm a cartoonist. I appreciate that. You're a cartoonist. You self-define. I got nothing to say about it. But it's a weird statement to me, right? Like, it's just because a cartoonist in drawing an individual panel that tries to hold all of the different aspects of the image in the story in that panel is one thing. But what a person does that creates a 200-page book, it's a much different thing than a cartoonist. And so the people that do those things and call themselves cartoonists, I don't quite get. That's just me. But the ones that raise the bar, those pieces that have impact and resonance and speak to something and start to define something on some term, start to be a prime example of a quality work. That's literature. That's not, Bob and Larry poop on a plate. And so,
which is also very entertaining.
It is very entertaining. I would never take away from Bob and Larry and their play activities, but
and their vision.
Ralph's Snart Adventures are fun. Ridiculous.
Right.
Somewhat inappropriate, but fun, right? Charles Bukowski, whatever, it's different, but it's got its voice. I'm not a Crumb guy, but Crumb has his voice.
Yeah.
Right? But then there's things that people do that sort of, there we go. Thank you, Dee Dee. The people that do things to a level, I respect that as well. I appreciate that. Like, I really like Asaf Hanukkah. I don't know if you know the
I'm familiar. I'm going to write it down, though.
Hanukkah and there's two brothers. It's Asaf and Homer. And one grew up in Israel, one grew up in New York. One was with mom, one was with dad. And the two brothers, it's a similar story to Gabriel Ba and Fabian Moon. Those two twin brothers, their parents separated. One was in Israel, one was in New York. Anyhow.
What was the last name again?
Hanuka. But he does a book called The Realist. And here's a person with a fantastic grasp of a page. He produces literature. He produces perspective. He does assessments of himself, assessments of his time and place as father and family, growing up during his raising a family in the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. Just there's, it's stuff that doesn't connect to my world that I live in, and yet at the same time, he talks about things that resonate on a human level, and it steps above the form. You're hard pressed to find a good Batman book after you read The Killing Joke.
Yeah.
You're hard pressed to find a good assessment of the fetishistic fascism or the fetishism of Batman when you read Arkham Asylum. How do you look at Batman the same again after you read that book? Because it's literature and it changed your headspace. So you can take mainstream and you can take, alternative books. I hate calling them alternative books and calling superheroes the mainstream because, honest to God, it's not. It's Western comics.
Yeah.
It's Western comics, and everything else is the mainstream. Superheroes is a Western thing, North American thing, and yet there's so many. Loisel's Peter Pan. What a beautiful work adapting Peter Pan.
Yeah.
French artist, absolutely fantastic. Like, there's just so many good works that are out there. A lot of them coming out of Europe these days. A lot of them coming out of, alternative publishers, Magnetic Press, Humanoids, so on. But you're hard pressed to find sequential literature in a Spider-Man book.
Right.
Today, right? Like that's Craven's Hunt was wonderful because it was about a person's war with himself more than it was about a bad guy fighting Spider-Man. It's about a person trying to see what nobility in himself there was by replacing Spider-Man.
Yeah.
There's certain writers like J.M. DeMatteis, and what he would do in the mainstream was approach it from a completely separate perspective than a mainstream comic writer. P. Craig Russell spent all of his time doing adaptations of Wagner's operas.
It's making me you're making me think of something that I've been thinking about for a few years now, which is it's two things. Is there a Spider-Man story left to tell, or a Batman story, or a Superman story? And even if there is that a story Marvel or DC would have told?
I think the ones that are available to tell still, they can't tell.
Right. That's what I think you're touching on is like, there may be a brilliant Spider-Man story left to tell, a brilliant Batman story, a brilliant Superman story, but within the confines of that playground, it's not tellable.
So you put inserts into an algorithm. You ask your AI generator produce for you a comic book about a rich billionaire who, okay, I saw a funny comic. Let's start off with this. I saw a funny cartoon, and this cartoon was, I'm not about victim shaming, but a billionaire couple dressed in really refined clothes with jewelry and all kinds of economic wealth worn on their persons.
Yes.
Was walking down a back alley in the crime part of the city.
Yeah. It was foolish. It was a little foolish.
And were they really surprised by what happened?
Right.
That's a terrible thing, but at the same time, there's a legitimacy to that. And,
yes.
And then the same thing about, there's a lot of heart. I saw another cartoon that suggested that everybody has different degrees of experiences and hardships, but not everybody has billions of dollars and a fetish kink to dress up in a costume and go up and beat up poor people in alleyways to get over their one thing that's caused them harm. And again, that's an extremism. I'll give you that. But at the same time, that's Batman, baby.
That is Batman. Yeah.
I call Batman a fetishistic fascist because he's imposing his will over a city, and he dresses as a bat and themes all of his, kit and caboodle as a Batman. But there's still legitimacy to people wanting to enjoy and experience Batman stories. I find that they get darker and darker and darker because they're edging towards the well, the edge of the tip of the well, the depth of the well, that says the thing that maybe it should say, that either A, Batman's a bad guy, or B, Batman's insane.
He's insane, right?
But you can't do those stories because that's a product. That's a corporate
You can
product.
only...
But you can do your story that says Batman's a bad guy. Mark Millar's done it with Nemesis.
Yeah.
Or you can do your story that says Batman's a bad guy. But it can't be Batman.
Right. And they'll wink at it. They'll sort of gesture over toward it. Like Dark Knight, the great Dark Knight. I'm talking about the movie. I mean, obviously, I think in the comic, like the sort of weird fascist elements of Batman are usually more on display. It's easier to see. But even in the movies, the Nolan movie, Dark Knight, where Batman is tapping every cell phone in Gotham to like listen in to try to find the Joker. Like that is a pretty, when you really think about that, that's a pretty wild move, but it's sort of snuck in there. And to be fair, I love Batman. I love those movies. I love those comics. But
I think that the Nolan Batman films are wonderful. It's sad that Heath passed away before the Nolan brothers couldn't do what they wanted with that arc, and they had to alter the story because of Heath's passing.
I know. It is a bummer. And also he does seed it with a little bit of subversion. Like there's a little bit of an acknowledgement of like, this isn't normal or healthy what he's doing. Like he's not, in some ways he's heroic, in some ways he's terribly misguided. I think
that everything that the Joker says in those films actually speaks to Batman too.
Yeah.
I'm not crazy. I'm just ahead of the curve.
Right. Ahead of the curve. Right.
I think that Batman just needs a hug. Thank you, Seven.
He does. Yeah.
I think that in any case example of anybody that you put forward, the Apollyon god that is Superman, the person that has the facility in order to change reality that is Green Arrow, the absolute upright example of what American idealism is in Captain America, the strange left leaning and yet right enacting example of Canadian identity as our Captain Connect these days. Like there's just all these examples in North American comic book superheroes that sort of, they take these established and long-standing identifiable things that we've had generationally and culturally repetitively over and over again. I still assert that the major characters at DC are replications of the pantheistic gods of Greece and Rome.
Yes.
The Marvel superheroes are power fantasies.
Yes.
And at the same time, slight corruptions of existing myths or literature, like the Hulk being Jekyll and Hyde, or Thor being a fantastic bastardization of Norse belief systems. It's all these stories are reiterations of story and identifiable in some level of contextual time and place, and it's just a certain style of it.
Yeah.
I think that the movies and television shows are largely played out. We need a break again before they do some more. But at the same time, Dee, if you want a fantastic time travel story and you have Netflix, you need to watch Dark.
Dark?
D-A-R-K. It is German. It is subtitled. It is 3 seasons long. I promise you will not know when one season ends and the next one begins, because it's done by a husband and wife writer and director team that maintain a pure and complete tight rein control on their project, and it just elevates stakes through the whole ding-dong thing.
I'm intrigued.
And I've never seen... I'm spoiling it in one regard, that I've intimated that it's a time travel piece. Because if you enter that in from the onset of just ready to just explore into a reality, into a world, into somebody's vision, without even knowing that, it blows your mind. It's Dark. It's German. That is easily the best time travel story I've ever seen, read, or heard in my life. That's a pretty big claim for me because I read
That is.
and a lot.
I
That
will
is
check it
easily
out.
the best.
I will check it out.
And if you're looking for other incredible shows on Netflix, the Icelandic television program called Trapped,
Okay.
phenomenal, absolutely phenomenal.
What is that about?
In an Icelandic town, cut off because a blizzard's taken out the only road that leads out of the mountains, and the same storm has absolutely blocked the escape by the ocean, and there's a killer in town.
I'm gonna check that out too.
Blizzard, and there's so many things that are produced by other countries that are setting the bar so much higher than some of the things that we're seeing produced here. Yeah. Everybody talks about Breaking Bad and the like, but I'm telling you, they don't compare to some of these foreign culture programs. Well, you're going to end up, Dee, if you like to read more than you watch, you're going to end up reading dark. So that's
yeah, these are all subtitled, so you sort of are.
And there's just something to that. I mean, Stranger from Korea. It's about a lawyer who, because of an accident in his youth, has lost the ability to express and understand emotion.
Oh.
And he and a female police officer are trying to figure out who's killed a person. And he's a stranger to humanity. He doesn't understand people. He's a lawyer.
Is there any kind of, is it referencing Camus' book at all, or is it just coincidence? Little sort of, maybe, kind of. Okay. All right.
A little bit, but that sort of gives away a bit of it, right?
Okay. Okay.
The identifiable self and how it fits into the context of the environment around.
Well, just from what you said, like a stranger from humanity, it's like, well, that's Camus, right?
These are the story things that we need to explore. I think that the stories that count, the stories that last, and I should probably get wrapping up soon, but I think that the stories that count and the stories that resonate and the stories that aspire towards being literature, the stories that aspire towards being something more immersive and experiential for the viewer or the reader are the ones that count. And so when you have that level of investment from yourself creatively, not for gain, not for notoriety, and not for any inclusionary consideration of, is this something that somebody can just do with AI? Because it's not going to be. But if you aspire towards those lofty, passionate ambitions, that's when you have the opportunity to potentially make literature. If you're not invested in the big, audacious scene, but you are invested in having two people in a car driving on a highway, just talking as who they are, getting this, Gary? Just talking as who they are, and we as the reader get to follow on this exploration of these two characters and take the little pieces that they're giving away in their conversation so that we have a more rounding understanding of these characters, so that when we get to the next part and the next experience that's at the end of this road, well, ideally we're invested in those characters. And sometimes that works rather well, Gary.
That sounds like an interesting story. No, I mean that was always
one I read recently, and I really liked it.
I love that you liked it, and
anyone that's not figuring this out yet, I'm talking about Gary's first book.
Yes, I really appreciate that, and that was obviously, even though it sounds, if you've been watching, yeah, there we go. I was picking up on that. If you've watched from the beginning,
what's that?
If you've watched from the beginning and you've heard my pitch of DVsM, it sounds very B movie, but in fact, it is a heavy character piece. Each anthology, each installment of the anthology, very focused on one particular person, And that was always my thought of how I wanted to handle this material. That if I can get you to care about the character in a very human, real way, the rest will take care of itself. And you'll be able to also suspend disbelief a little bit easier, because I've got, this is the back door into suspending disbelief. I'm going to put a person in front of you that you can relate to in some way, that you like, in some way that you think is interesting. And if you can buy into that, now I can take you on a crazy ride. And it'll hit different if I just gave you the crazy ride.
It's breadcrumbs.
Yeah.
Breadcrumbs of the sandwich. The piece that I'm doing right now, The Village Haunted, I've been posting on Facebook and Instagram. And if people go back to the first page and then follow each of the pages and read them, the challenge with doing it this way is that there's all the interruptions, and there's all these other posts about the comic jam that I run or whatever else. Or today I like spoons. I don't know what the hell I post half the time, but if somebody goes back and looks at that, hopefully these are breadcrumbs to get somebody to pick up the project, should I release it, or when I release it, or however the hell it gets released. But the idea that I'm exploring this is the same thing. It starts off with two kids in the woods, and then the next page is one of the kids running out of the woods to the priest and saying, my sister's gone. And then chapter 2, and then of course there's things that happen in chapter 1. Chapter 2 is about two girls walking home from school, and they hear some ethereal voice saying, girls, girls. So they run home and tell mom about, this day of ghost stories that happened at the high school today. And it goes someplace else. And then the third part tries to come back to part 1. And then the fourth part goes a different direction again. It's about two kids and the crap they get up to the course of their day. And so the way that I'm approaching this story is giving you little insights into little parcels of characters, and they're all going to come together.
Yes.
It's all connecting up now. And it's a different approach to telling story for me from a more, hey, we're following this. This is a first person Inception character, like every Tom Cruise movie that was ever made, where Tom Cruise is the nobody everyman that we're following through it. He just happens to always be Herculean.
Right. He can do anything. Yeah.
And run.
Yes. And he can run. Boy, oh boy, can he run.
38 out of 45 films he's ran in. It's his stick. But the way
do you think that's part of his contract? It's don't you think there should be some running in here?
No, it literally is now. But now it's a case of I'm trying to explore the story. I'm not caring about the rest of it. Yeah. Because I'm trying to set myself a higher bar. And I think that creatively, as long as we do this is the stuff that AI is never going to touch.
No. Yeah.
It
has no way to touch it. And that's a bold thing to say when technology eventually seems to be able to do anything. But that's not what it's about. It's not what it's about.
No. So if you do find people that express malaise, or they have concern that the sky is falling, because AI is going to get us, tell them to pick up a pencil and not worry about it.
Yeah, it's
as reductive as that.
Yeah, there's lots of things maybe that are worth talking about with AI. Lots of things that are worth some concern or some hand wringing. But at the end of the day, at least in my opinion, let's worry about the environment. I would love to have the problem of AI taking over our jobs in 40 years. If that's our biggest problem, I worry that we're going to be looking at other things. So,
it's I think that there's all this investment in the superficial to hey, look, shiny, look at this. Don't worry about that.
Yeah. They're storming capitals, guys. Look, yes, let's worry about the AI, but
it's a challenging thing, and that's, I think, that the easiest thing to do, and I think that is a twofold approach. And one is just do your best work.
Yes.
Do the thing that challenges you. One. And two is
encourage others to do the same. Yes. Find what I've said before is, you know, what's the story only you can tell?
Yeah.
What's, you know, there's something out there. It might take some finding, it might take some time, but what is the story that only you can tell? Not just like an AI can't tell, what any other artist can't tell. What is your weird story, your thing? I want to read your thing. I want to watch your thing. I want to listen to your music. I want to, you know, like that's what's interesting.
Yeah, to sing your song, sing your own song, tell your own truth. All of those different ways that people say it. It's absolutely true.
Yeah.
All right. Well, hold on. Let me do this.
Oh my gosh. Oh my God. Here we go.
Here we go.
Look out.
At this point, I'm going to close the tape on this interview. Thank you very much, Gary. It's been very illuminating for all of us. It's I can't even deal with this straight.
I hope so. That's tough. I really appreciate finally being able to get by, and I enjoy your show a lot. I want to. You are. This is also something I talk about on my YouTube a lot. I think once we get out of art school, we realize that fellow creatives are rare. And most people don't do this thing. Most people aren't oriented in that way. And it's very important to patchwork together some sort of tribe where you feel that community and you see that kinship and you recognize in other people the same thing, whether they're doing a totally different thing. It doesn't matter. It's still sort of the same family. And I count you among that. It means a lot to me during the week to be able to click on your live stream, and even if I'm at my day job, to hear it in the background and remember that I'm part of that thing. So
that's very nice of you.
I value you.
Oh, thank you very much. I appreciate that, Gary. Your live streams are fantastic as well. I mean, there's just that earnestness that you approach. Here's my journey. Here's the things that I find inspiration from.
Yep.
And I love that. I mean, again, it's that's what counts is individuals getting together and showing the authentic self.
Yes.
Here's me, not perfect, but here's what I got. Here's what I do. And if in any way it helps you have any level of interest to do what I do, all I can do is exhibit how I go about it along the way. That's
exactly it. And raid this war chest for whatever's useful to you, even if it's by inverse. You know, you see it, it's like, that doesn't seem like the way that would work for me. Maybe that'll help you in your way. Yeah, you know, like whatever, however this might be useful. You know, that's
I can't believe that guy still uses a pencil.
Outrageous.
Maroon.
Outrageous.
You know, but when Paul watches my streams, he watches them in black and white with a fedora on and goes, well, it's not the way I do it, but I see what he's up to there. That's the way Paul watches it. Because we're pretty sure that you live in that world, Paul.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Well,
Paul, by the way, is also, I enjoy Paul a lot, and I really enjoy his work. I'm looking forward to the third Detective Perez. I mean, come on.
Yeah, it's one of those things where, and the time he spent on his animation.
Yeah.
That
last animation, the most recent one he did with the whole crazy.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
You know, I'm a big guy for the Bill Plimpton, Ralph Bakshi, hey, I'm doing it my way kind of animators. And yeah, when I see what Paul did there, I'm like, yeah, that's one guy's voice right there.
Well, that's also why I'm a great fan of, not just because he's a good friend of mine, but a great fan of Jim Lujan, because it's another example of art where it's like, that is 100% Jim. You can tell, like, that's like, there's no mistaking it, you know?
Yeah. So. Just his little, Jim did a little thing for
Josh's commercial.
Josh is, it was a book review.
Yes.
Of Josh. And that was my first exposure to Jim's work, and by God, I get it. I mean, there's a guy who just, that's a book review. That's an authentic book review from a guy who's just, here it is.
Yes. I don't know if you've seen it, but since you mentioned Plimpton, he had a thing he did with Bill Plimpton.
Oh, I haven't. I have to look into that.
Yeah, I'm blanking on the name right now.
Yeah.
just because I'm still. But yeah, just seek it out. Just if you type in Jim Lujan, Bill Plimpton, there's one hit. It's a feature.
Nice. So. I'll definitely have to check it out because I'm a fan. I'm a fan.
Yes.
So that's great. All right. Thanks for everybody that tuned in today. Thanks. Thanks for everybody taking part in this discussion. That's a gift. This is and of course, Gary, thanks for coming on up. And let's do more of this stuff, guys.
Absolutely. Thank you. And now next time I got to have you on my channel. So we'll figure that out.
I'm on board.
Cool.
Right on. Okay. Thanks, everybody. Have a great day. Get creating. Bye for now.